Welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. What are we talking about today? Well, Ashish Chauhan, Managing Director and CEO of the Bombay Stock Exchange, has just been appointed as the Managing Director and CEO of the National Stock Exchange. The National Stock Exchange, as you know, is the largest derivatives exchange in the world in terms of trading volumes. So this is a huge appointment. I don't know how many of you know, but it is really a ghar wapasi for Ashish Chauhan. He is going back to the National Stock Exchange after nearly 20 years. He had come to NSE as the youngest member of its founding team. At that time, it was a vastly different organization. When he joined, it was highly respected, made path-breaking change, transformed the Indian capital markets, and he was one among a bunch of wonderful professionals. This was 1992. He left the exchange in 2000 when it was considered the epitome of transparency, efficiency, values, ethics, with the unthinkable achievement of market dominance. I mean, amazing market dominance. It was already a virtual monopoly. It had beaten the BSE by miles, and its profits were extraordinary. In fact, so extraordinary that they would have been impossible under a fair and equitable market regime. Now, at that time, NSE in 2000, when Ashish left, was already facing its first brush with controversy. Its executives were being grilled by the Joint Parliamentary Committee after the Ketan Parekh scam on what is known as the Advanced Lending and Borrowing Mechanism, or as people on the BSE like to call it, NSE's Badla trading or Badla financing. Okay, so he left at that time. He's coming back, then joined the BSE, much smaller exchange. He takes over from Mr Vikram Limaye, who's MD and CEO, who demitted office on 16th of July. Vikram Limaye, unfortunately, had a really difficult 5 years in the NSE. He had a golden opportunity to rebuild a morally broken institution, but some major mistakes right in the beginning did not allow him to achieve that change. So NSE's co-location scam was at the center and dominant part of Vikram Limaye's entire 5 years. He made the cardinal mistake of deciding to contest all of SEBI orders. There were paltry penalties. If he had just paid and moved on, he could have achieved a cleanup. In fact, I've written in one of my early articles that there were just two expectations from Vikram Limaye, really, because it was already a profitable machine. That didn't have to change. It was already huge, a monopoly. That did not have to change. So when the market grows, trading would only have gone up. There was nothing else to be done. Profits also would have gone up. He needed to clean up after the co-location scam, and he needed to get the exchange listed. This is what people were expecting. He had a lucky break in terms of a ferocious bull market, which ensured that in terms of his financial performance, he could report higher trading volumes and higher profitability. But it was a ferocious bull market, especially after the COVID pandemic. In fact, India's investor population nearly doubled in those 2.5 years. But NSE had many issues, which we have written about. 32 broker defaults at that time. So what is it that Ashish Chauhan faces when he steps into Mr. Limaye's shoes or comes back to the organization he left? Comes to a different seat. It's a hot seat, and it's an organization that still remains in disarray because the co-location scam has gone off in different directions and nobody even knows where it is headed and who else is going to be ensnared rightly or wrongly in it. Consider this. The founding team has two people who had an ignominious exit. Two others who came in had a problem. Anand Subramaniam, Group Operating Officer, less said the better. You've seen my previous video blogs. Vikram Limaye, a rather uneventful period. In fact, I feel that Ashish Chauhan has to learn from the mistakes of Vikram Limaye, who had a good opportunity. Ashish, of course, is heading the largest exchange, like I said, derivatives exchange in the world. It's a huge opportunity. But when you listen to what I have to say, you'll realize it's a hot seat and the challenges also are humongous. And I have just in this video blog mapped out what he's going to face, because expectations from Ashish Chauhan are sky high. Why? He understands markets, he understands listing, he understands technology, he was part of the founding team. So while the organization may look different 20 years later, he's been in the same regulatory environment, always just a step behind the NSE in terms of all the meetings, regulatory issues, SEBI committees. So he does not get a break. He comes in with a lot of expectations, he has to hit the ground running and he has to perform. At the best of times, being the MD means having to do careful balancing act between many powerful vested interests, each of them pulling in different directions. The MD's job is to manage all that and still run a good exchange. So while the pay may be superb, prestige may be enormous, it's not really an enviable position unless you can perform, especially just now, where it's not seen as this pristine institution that can do no wrong. So you come in a different environment, the challenges are huge. So let me list them out. So 4 or 5 things that I want to talk about. 1, he needs to reduce expectations, because if he tries to live up to what people expect from him, he's in for trouble. So the biggest mistake would be to continue with this philosophy that I will be a near monopoly and I will continue to have 70% operating margins. He's come from a smaller exchange. He knows what it feels like. So he has to say, it's okay to give up a bit of market share. Let's have healthy competition. Let's have more exchanges in the market rather than entire focus and pressure on him. That would be the prudent thing to do. As MD, he would certainly want to maintain market leadership, even by a wide margin, but that is different from a near monopoly. And as for those profits, I don't think it's going to be possible. In a fair system with equitable access, it has to work differently. And coming from the BSE, he really can't continue doing what NSE was doing. He cannot say more of the same things. So if he makes retention of market share part of his key result areas, I think it would be disastrous. Second, he has to set technology right. All of you would remember this huge glitch that happened on 24th February 2021, where trading was just halted for a long time. I'm not going to go into details. I'm going to jump into what SEBI said at that time. So let me read. So the regulator had accused NSE of having faulty design in critical trading infrastructure, lower than required capacity to handle peak load, failure to test and supervise, failover logic. It also accused top management, specifically named 2 people including Mr Limaye, of adopting a casual, lackadaisical and less than honest approach to allowing trading to continue without adequate risk management for well over an hour after the problem was detected. So nobody knew, there was compulsory squaring off that happened at the end of it, and SEBI has tightened a lot of rules, has issued a fatwa about how you have to switch to the backup server, which is a mirror server. But until the next big glitch happens, we don't know whether all this is in place and it's working. Now, the Economic Times in May 2022 reported that NSE has approached SEBI to want to settle this issue. You know how settlements happen. You pay an amount, you don't admit to any problem, but you pay what amounts to a penalty. That hasn't gone through as yet. We don't even know what happens to the 2 individuals who have been named in SEBI show cause notice. Will that also be settled and buried with a penalty? We don't know. It's not been accepted. So Ashish Chauhan has the job of handling that one way or the other. It's not a problem that he's created, but he will have to handle it. He'll have to put in place technology to handle peak load volumes that SEBI has talked about and ensure that the backup server works the next time there is a technical outage. And we have to see a smooth move over or handover. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very embarrassing for the exchange. The third big issue that Moneylife has repeatedly flagged are the broker defaults and expulsions in the last 2.5 to 3 years alone. 32. In fact, we've made a presentation to SEBI about it. Since May 2019, 32 brokers have either defaulted or been expelled. It's entirely during his term. I was told by someone in SEBI that this is considered part of cleanup. But remember, thousands of investors have lost, hold your breath, thousands of crores of rupees. Okay, and some of the big ones that we have repeatedly written about: Anugrah Stock and Broking, Karvi Stock Broking, BMA Wealth Creators, Fairwell Securities, They are the big ones. There was Modex. Now, we have also pointed out how investors have got a raw deal because the investor protection fund gives only a certain amount of money. In our view, it's not enough. Broker defaults are primarily due to poor oversight of the exchange and by the exchange of brokers. And this also, we have said very clearly, has happened because the exchange was more focused on trading volumes. As long as the broker was bringing in new volumes, they weren't concerned about whether they were running a Ponzi scheme, luring people with some kind of derivatives exchange issues where they promised high returns. We have talked about it. You can read about it at the link that is given up there. A fourth issue that I want to flag is about the fair deal to investors. Like I said, 32 broker defaults. Most people have got either a tiny fraction of their money or not at all. So you lose crores of rupees, you're getting fobbed off with 15 lakhs. Personally, we believe, in Moneylife at least, that Mr. Chauhan could do well to increase the size of the investor protection fund. He had a big fund at the BSE, far larger than what was required for his trading volumes. He's coming to an exchange which is 100 times literally of what the BSE was. He has to increase the size of that investor protection fund. And if 32 broker defaults is part of a cleanup, then please be fair, give a better deal, relook at it, and show that you really care about investors. In fact, I made a presentation to SEBI's Malingam committee. Here's a link. If you're interested, you can read more about why I think it has been unfair to investors and why we hope that Mr. Chauhan is going to make a change. The fifth point is an administrative cleanup that's required. Now, I have pointed out before that Vikram Limaye's cardinal mistake was contesting SEBI orders, which means that you had to take along the same team. If you say we did no wrong, then you have to protect everybody who's with it because you filed appeals. Thanks to that, the co-location issue remained and it's becoming hydra-headed. Now, NSE is recognized as a public authority, so the Prevention of Corruption Act applies. The happy days of the past where consultants and others could be appointed at will, even employees could be promoted, all that is gone. It is unlikely that the new board is going to give the kind of sweeping powers to Ashish Chauhan that it gave to Ravi Narayan and Chitra when they were managing directors. So he comes in a different situation with a lot more accountability. Unfortunately, this whole transparency business is going to stop at a point. We hope he's going to be more transparent. In fact, we hope he'll take the next step and withdraw the case or appeal filed against applicability of Right to Information Act, which is before a division bench of the Delhi High Court. Please come under RTI. It is a disinfectant, it throws sunlight, and it is good for everybody. I don't see that happening because it can easily be settled with SEBI issuing an order. That hasn't happened. Now, the last big expectation from Mr. Chauhan is he has to get NSE listed. That was one of the core requirements for this post in the advertisement that was put out. He took BSE through a listing process very successfully. He had to fight SEBI for 10 years to even get the rules framed, and he did a successful job. It has to be repeated. With all these controversies over co-location, it's unlikely to happen in the near future, but it is definitely going to be expected that before his 5 years are complete, he is going to achieve enough of a cleanup at NSE to go through with this IPO. There are too many people holding shares. The manner in which the shares have been sold has been completely non-transparent. This is another of the transparency issues that will have to be handled. As I said, listing can only happen if the board is with him and things are cleaned up on co-location, and you can move forward towards making a proper IPO prospectus and approaching the public with a fair price. All eyes will be on how Ashish Chauhan handles this very, very difficult issue. As you can see from what I said, this may be a golden throne, but it is so hot. So big salary, lots of prestige, largest derivatives exchange, but a very hot seat. So I just end by saying all the best to you, Mr. Ashish Chauhan. Congratulations. We are expecting a lot from you, but we realize you're in for a tough job. Thank you. If you like what I said, please share this video.